Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm Alita Guillen. Today's conversation is about the science behind bullshit, how bullshit affects our communication. We're going to hear the difference between lying and BS, why we believe BS, and if and when it even matters. My guest is an expert on BS, Gordon Pennycook. He is an author, psychologist, researcher, and Cornell University professor. His class at Cornell is called The Science of Human Stupidity. He joins me now to talk about how we process information and why relying on our intuition isn't always a good idea.
Stand by. We're going live. We're going live. 10, 9, going live. 7, 6, 5, going live. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Gordon Pennycook, thank you so much for joining me. We had a little technical difficulty to get started. We are now finally here.
That's just the modern life, isn't it?
That's the way it goes. But the good news is we are here. And now I'm just going to throw right into the first question, which what goes through your mind 10 seconds to air, which may have changed in the last 5 minutes.
Well, I said it's relevant because what I wanted to say, or like that is the thing that I want to happen in 10 seconds to air, is that I'm sitting in quiet reflection, thinking about all the important things that I want to say. In reality, what I'm doing is probably distracting myself with the internet or something, or in this case, struggling with technology, which is sort of the same sort of problem, I guess,
Right,
isn't it?
Right. Well, I'm really excited to get into this conversation, the science behind bullshit, bullshit, how it affects communication, all of the above. You teach a super interesting class at Cornell, which you're about to go into today. Name of that class is what?
The Science of Human Stupidity.
The Science of Human Stupidity. So it's not so much about calling out bullshitters, let's say. It's more about what's happening in our brain.
Yeah, I think the reason why people are interested in the course and just the topic of stupidity in general is that they want to understand other people's stupidity. But really what the course is about and what we really ought to be concerned with is like understanding our own stupidity. And really the course is about how to avoid those kind of errors that we all make, where if you were to stop and think a little bit more, maybe you wouldn't have made the same choice.
Right.
Or there's lots of things that we believe based on poor evidence, things of that nature. So it's about calling out our own bullshit, actually. But some of that involves calling out other people's bullshit too, I guess.
But we're not really here to shame anyone. We're here to understand why this happens, what it is, the difference between bullshit and lying, which I hadn't really thought about until we started doing some of this research. How did you get started in this research?
Depends how far back you want to go. Basically, the longer version of the story is that I grew up in a very small town in rural Canada, in Saskatchewan, a town called Carrot River. And my experience was I ended up not believing in God, as happens sometimes. Although, as far as I could tell, it had never happened in the town that I'm from.
Okay.
So I ended up having very different beliefs than everybody else. And so I was always really fascinated in like the way that people think about things. And then I kind of stumbled into this academic career. And now I get to actually investigate that empirically, where mostly we're just interested in the nature of human reasoning and why we make mistakes and why we believe what we believe, and why we fall for misinformation, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And so how does the research go? How do you actually research bullshit?
Oh, there's lots of different ways to do that. I mean, the standard way that we do things is we have people come in and do studies. Like we have participants come in. Some of it was actually like literally in person, like in a traditional like psychology lab where people come in, they answer questions and they do experiments and there's like lights flashing, and we don't actually ever use any, like, we don't zap people or anything like that. But and we also can do lots of online studies. You can get samples of people from across the world because of access to the internet and things like that. And so it's just like a matter of asking people the right sort of questions and introducing different kind of experimental treatments and getting as much as we can out of like the things that people say and what they're interested in and what their views are and how they think.
And let's just start with the definition of bullshit. What's the definition of bullshit?
So there's some contention about this. I'll give you one definition of bullshit. I think it's probably the most popular one. So Harry Frankfurt was a Princeton philosopher. He wrote an excellent it was an essay that turned into a little book that's great to have on a coffee table or something. It's called On Bullshit by Harry Frankfurt. And what he does is he distinguishes between bullshit and lying.
Mm,
So think about what lying is. If you lie about something, that implies that you care about the truth of
mm.
the thing. Like you care about it enough that you want to subvert it and convince someone else that, the thing that you think is true, they don't think is true. Um, Bullshitting is essentially defined as the opposite of that. It's constructing something without concern for the truth.
Okay.
Now, that means bullshit can sometimes be true, sometimes be false, but it doesn't matter. It's kind of incidental. If you're bullshitting, that means, you're trying to get someone's attention, you're trying to sell something to them, you're trying to sound impressive, whatever. And that's the kind of the core idea of what bullshitting is.
Hmm. So then why do people bullshit?
Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons why you bullshit. I mean, there's lots of reasons why the truth isn't the most important thing in a particular case, right? Like, I mean, you want to make sure that you aren't subverting the truth in most cases. People value the truth, but often they don't put it first, or in many
Hmm.
cases they aren't considering it at all because they have to make the ad budget, or they have to make
Right.
sure they sell the product, or
Right.
they want to, you know, uh, have a really great podcast. But then that's why you have scientists on who are really dedicated to the truth, and that it's difficult. So I think we all kind of bullshit to some extent, but some of us are more readily willing to kind of throw the truth to the side.
And who are those people that are willing to, is there a certain type of person that is willing to push the truth to the side more often than not?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't great research on bullshitting, and that is on the propensity to bullshit. What my research is on is basically, are you receptive to it? And that's easier to investigate. It's hard to get the propensity to bullshit because people bullshit in the surveys. And if you're really good at bullshitting, it's hard to identify the people who are doing it and versus not. So it's actually a difficult problem to solve. We do know that there are people, who apparently have less concern for the truth and who are less interested in updating their beliefs based on evidence.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of apparent. But, you know, doing good research on exactly who are the bullshitters is a difficult question to answer.
So you're doing the research on the other side. You're finding out,
Hmm.
why are people believing the BS?
Yeah.
What are you finding? Why are people believing the BS?
So one big key important thing to understand, and it relates to other types of beliefs too. It's not just whether you believe like bullshit claims. It could be like, why do you why are you kind of gullible in a more general sense? And it's about reliance on intuition. So intuition is good. Like
Mm.
we have this like automatic way of processing information. And that allows me to, like, if we've met here today. If I were to see you on the street, if I ever came down to LA for some reason, I would probably recognize you. And that's because of this key intuitive processes that help us kind of identify faces, and we're really good at that. However, there are some things that our intuitions are not good for,
Mm.
and that's kind of like understanding dense information, complex information. But we use it anyways. And those are contexts where we actually need to stop and to think about things. And this is the best example of this is on social media, where everything is kind of just automatic and reflexive. You're like sharing things and you're looking at stuff, and everything's just about attention, attention, attention. But really what we need, especially if we're kind of engaging with like news content, is we have to stop and think about it. We have to think, is this actually true before we stop and share it? And so that is one of the reasons why people fall for bullshit, is because they just aren't thinking that much about the stuff that they're engaging with online or offline.
But you're talking about intuition versus thinking about it.
Yeah,
Those are
reflection. Yeah.
reflection. Okay. So let's dive into that a little bit, because one is intuition. My intuition tells me, oh, I'm going to talk to this person, or I'm going to believe them. My intuition is, I think he's telling the truth. That's intuition. The other side of that is what?
Uh, Stopping and checking. Like, so there's two different ways that your mind processes information, and they're fundamentally kind of different. Like, if I ask you what your name is, you don't have to think about the question to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
It pops into your head. 2 + 2 = what? And you actually can't, in many ways, stop yourself from thinking it.
Okay.
Even if you don't say it, it's what pops into your head. It's like an automatic process. But if I ask you, what's 37 times 82? Now, maybe you have memorized that particular thing, but probably you haven't. You have to decide to answer that.
Oh,
You have to
right.
decide to stop and think about it.
Yeah.
And that's different, right? But so we have the thing that's going on in the background all the time is giving us these outputs, these cognitive outputs of like responses from the world. And they may or may not be relevant or important, and they could mislead us. If we want to make sure they're accurate, we have to kind of stop and reflect. We have to double check them to make sure they're accurate. Or in some cases, there's nothing that comes to mind, and we actually just have to think about it in order to get to an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reflection part, and that's the part that's harder, and it takes more effort, and it is not really, let's say, facilitated by a lot of the way that we've structured our environment in the modern era.
So in your research, what are you finding in that distinction between the intuition and the reflective part?
One element of it is that people vary a lot in how much they rely on their intuition versus they reflect. So this is actually a core kind of individual difference, one that explains a lot of things. So I could give people a single problem, and I'll give you an example. Uh, if you're running a race and you pass the person in second place, what place are you in? And people often will want to say first place because you pass. But if you pass
Oh,
the person
right,
in second
right.
place, you're still in
In second place.
Now you're in second.
Okay.
It's because you're only imagining the person that you pass, and you don't imagine the person first. So it's kind of an automatic response that comes to mind, but it's a very trivial thing to understand once you get explained it, and you have to kind of stop and think about it. But if I give people that question and they get it wrong, they're much more likely to believe in supernatural claims. They're more likely to believe in conspiracies, and they're more likely to like make other sorts of reasoning errors or mistakes. And so it's a very kind of simple little trick, but it's the underlying principle of that people have to kind of stop and reflect, and that changes the choices that they make, and that changes like what they believe, and that changes the way they live their lives.
So you will actually see people who answer that question quickly as a sort of reactionary, intuitive answer. You will see that they have a propensity to believe in other things that do not have facts to support them.
That's right. Yep.
Wow. I think a lot of people, I mean, what is there a percentage? Like how many of the people actually go second place?
Oh, well, it varies across the different. That's only one type of one. We have a much larger set of questions that we ask in this sort of thing to get a better measure than just like a single question.
Yeah.
And so that depends on the sample you met. I mean, a lot of people get that right. I think half the people get that one right. But we have other problems like a bat and ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? It's easier if you see it written. People want to say 10 cents, but the answer is 5 cents. Before anyone's listening is struggling with the question, the
Okay,
answer is
go
5
slow.
cents.
Say that one again, but go slow.
If a bat and ball costs $1.10 in total,
Okay.
the bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
Right.
And so 10 cents is the kind of intuitive answer because of the difference between $1 and $1.10. But if it was 10 cents, then the bat costs $1 more, so it'd be $1.10,
Right.
and so in total it'd be $1.20, right? Anyways, like only like in a general sample of the public, like only like 20% of people get that right. The math, once you like show people the math, everyone's like, oh, it makes total sense. But the 10 cents answer that pops into your head rapidly, it's so intuitive that like it just seems like an obvious answer.
Right.
And the tendency to kind of stop and think about it, that's more difficult if you have a very intuitive, and often case, not this case, but in the real world, often an emotional kind of response. It's hard to put the work in to kind of to tamp that down.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two questions that come out of that. One is, why do we do that? Why do we answer so quickly? Is that something that's ego driven? What's driving that of saying like, I have to answer this quickly? And then, well, let's start with that. And then I'll get you to the second one.
One version of the answer to that is it's just evolution, and like that, all animals essentially only have that system of the reflexive response. This is why, you see the ants will do the parade of death where they march in a circle and they can't get out of it because they only have the one system that allows them to like do the automatic thing. And they don't have the reasoning system that humans have. And so it's just like, that's just the way that the brains evolved, that we have this kind of, and you might call it a lizard brain, but it really is actually highly functional. And most of the time, our intuitions are pretty good, actually. And they allow us to do things like recognize faces or whatever. It's just that there are particular contexts in which our intuitions might be faulty, and we have to put extra work into getting them right. And sometimes we do, and that's how we got to the moon, and that's how we do all these kind of great things. But we could do better. That's the point, is that if we get into the habit of being more reflective and stopping and thinking about and questioning our intuitions, we could make better choices. It's just kind of harder to do.
Okay. Is it laziness? I know you've talked about laziness before, but what I'm hearing you say is it's not necessarily laziness. It's that's how we are born, I guess, that we want to intuitively answer questions.
Well, we're born with a system that allows us to do that, and that's true of everybody. The tendency to be willing to question your intuitions, and then what that means essentially is your beliefs. That you can talk about that in terms of laziness. Like there are people which it's just not, they aren't willing to put in the work in to make sure they get it right. And I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing to call lazy. Yeah.
And once people are faced with the information, like the facts, let's say, how often are they likely to believe them and or not believe them or dismiss them?
So, I mean, it's a broad question, but more than you think. So here's why.
What's more than you think? What's more than you think?
People change their mind more than you think they do.
Okay.
So we generally have this, like, we're lazy in the general sense. Like, no one puts extra effort into things unless there's like reason to do it. And so the problem is that you need something that prompts people to like realize that they need to think about something. And so there's something missing there. So let's take the example of people who believe conspiracies. This is like a kind of key example that people give of people who don't care about the truth and they aren't spending enough time thinking about it in the right sort of way. And there's lots of psychological research on how conspiracies are driven by all these like needs and motivations. Like people who believe conspiracies, like they want to feel more unique, or they want to like get a sense of control over the world and things of that nature. And so then there's like, if you look at all the kind of research on like debunking conspiracies, where people just like guess what conspiracy people believe in and then like find some like evidence that counteracts it. They give that to people and mostly you don't get that much change. And so people concluded in the literature for a long time that like people don't change their minds. And this is, I think, a common experience where like if you were to have a conversation, maybe it happened over Thanksgiving or over the subsequent holidays, that like you discuss political topics with somebody who you disagree with, hardly ever do they change their mind. But there's an alternative possibility, and that is the reasons that you've given people, the evidence that you've given people when you have these conversations isn't good enough. You haven't given them enough reason to change their mind. And it's not that they're like not willing to question and they don't care about the truth. It's that they haven't, been given a good enough reason to actually to change their mind. And so we have experiments where we've used artificial intelligence, large language models, to have personalized conversations with conspiracy believers about the conspiracy that the person believes in, that's written in their own words. They provide reasons for why they believe that 9/11 is an inside job or the moon landing is a hoax or whatever the thing is. And then the AI provides like very dense, highly accurate, factual counter arguments. And what you find is a quarter of the people who believe the conspiracy before the conversation don't believe it anymore after about 8 minutes of talking with the AI.
Okay. A quarter of the people, 25% of the people.
Yeah, which is more than I would expect. I mean, I think that's probably more than most people would expect. Evidence matters way more than we thought. And that's a context, partly because that's a context where you're being confronted with the counter arguments and they're very good. And so it's hard to just, you can't be lazy in that case. I mean, there are people, of course, who are just rejecting it and they're going on for the survey. But a lot of people they're like, I mean, I guess maybe I'm wrong.
Really?
And I think that there's something surprising about that.
That is surprising. I think that a lot of us would think, it certainly surprises me. I've had, I guess I'm not very convincing, but there's a lot of conversations that I've had. And it's almost like I feel if you believe in something, you don't necessarily want it to be debunked. If it's bullshit, it's embarrassing to later go, oh, I was wrong. Is that something you look into?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. And I think even if it were the case, imagine the version of this where you were having a conversation with somebody and you gave an argument as good as our AI is giving, which is implausible, but imagine that were true. The person might not admit to having to change their mind in the moment, or they might even not have changed their mind in that moment, but, later on when they're kind of laying in bed and they're thinking about it, like that's when the change kind of happens. And maybe they would never admit it to you, but it still would impact the way they're thinking. And so that's the kind of thing. And we see in this experiment where people were kind of their conspiracy beliefs were being debunked by AI. We recontacted them up to 2 months later, and they still were at the same level. They still didn't believe the conspiracies, and it hadn't gone back to normal. It was just like they still were skeptical about the conspiracies after the conversation.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so you follow up to make sure that they don't drop off and that they're
exactly.
And
they weren't just coalescing to us or whatever.
Right.
They really did change their minds.
And did any of those 25% that did believe, you have any of the 75% that still believed in the conspiracy, did they over time start to seek out additional facts and maybe question?
That's a great question. We don't really know. It's because it's too hard, because we can only measure them at the few time points. And even if we were to ask, like, did you go out and, like, how accurate the reports are, would be kind of dubious. So we want to do a kind of a study that tracks more kind of behavioral stuff
Hmm.
subsequently, but we haven't done it yet. So I don't know.
Okay. So I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. Sometimes bullshit is kind of fun. Sometimes a really good bullshitter, I think of someone who tells a really good story. They're entertaining, kind of fun to listen to. Maybe you even know and you hear your friend tell a story and you go, yeah, it didn't go down like that, but wow, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Is there a time where we can overlook the fact that somebody's bullshitting? Like, when does it really matter?
I mean, actually that's you. I mean, I think you answered your own question with the last question, which is it's about deciding when it really matters. I mean, think about if Hollywood every time they made a biopic
Right, right.
and they made it so that it was very strictly, it's like a more like a documentary. No one's going to watch it. And so like even if you were someone whose life was being maybe covered in one of these things, you say, oh yeah, you stretch it to make it more interesting, more people will get it. And then you get the underlying kind of core ideas from it. And still that's preserves some, so it's okay to stretch things if you're in service of the truth in that case. Or in other cases, just like, it's just fun. It's just for, not everything has to be about the truth. The question or the thing that's important to know about that though, is that people have to be in on it, and like a good example of that is like The Onion. They do satirical headlines and it's funny. And that's like, yeah, they're bullshitting. But it only becomes a problem when people think that
Yeah, that it's true.
they aren't satirical, right? But as
Right.
long as you're in on it, then there's nothing wrong with it at all.
Let's dive into that a little bit more, because I guess we know that it's true, or it doesn't matter if it's true. It depends on if it matters really, if it's true, because some of those headlines could not really matter to people. I mean, it's part of conspiracy theory. It's part of whatever category you want to put it in, but it doesn't really matter if it's true. I hear many people in conversations that I have that I know are untrue. There's some kind of something that's going on that's not true, and I present evidence to show that it's not true, or someone does that to me. I'm often told that it doesn't really matter anyway, or it's really easy for them to go, yeah, doesn't matter.
I know this is why I hesitant to some extent to say that there are cases in which the truth matters more than others, and I mean that's generally the case, but we have to be really cautious about that, because another version of that is, say you take this is a thing that there's some research on this. For example, what happens sometimes when a politician lies, or says something that's blatantly false. At least we don't, whether it's a lie or bullshitting, it's separate. What people will say is that, well, it might be strictly speaking false. Like, okay,
What's that
fine.
mean? What's that mean?
Like you say there's a claim like, immigrants are eating cats and dogs or something ridiculous like that. And say, well, they're not literally eating cats and dogs, fine. But the underlying gist of it, the meaning of it, which is like, we need to be wary of these people, that kind of stuff, that's still true. So it doesn't matter that it's strictly speaking false, because there's still truth there. And, we can relax our standards for the literal kind of truth and falsity. I think that's a dangerous kind of slippery slope, essentially, where we don't hold ourselves to a sufficient standard of like really putting the truth first when it matters. When you're talking about what immigrants are doing in a political debate, for example, is a place where it would matter. And so I think people are basically too lax on that. And that's a version of the kind of lazy thinking thing where it's like, it takes extra work to really make sure that things are true that you're saying. Especially when it's important, or it actually takes work to think about whether it's important. It's all things that require thinking.
Right.
And so it comes down essentially to the same story, which is we need to be more reflective and more mindful of how we're communicating with each other, how we're engaging online, all these sorts of things.
Yeah. Let's talk about that online. So if I get information, do you have a certain suggestion, a protocol of how we should decipher the information and not be lazy about it?
Well, okay, it depends on exactly what sort of choice you're making. One simple recommendation is we found in some studies that when people are deciding what to share online, they will share things that they would be able to identify as being false if they thought about it. So here's what I mean by that. So we have two conditions in this experiment where we ask some people, we give them like a set of like true and false news headlines from the world, like actual headlines. And we ask them, hey, do you think that these, like, how accurate do you think these are? Okay, so the task is to identify whether they're like how true and false they are. And if you do that, people are actually quite good at distinguishing between true and false news headlines. If in a different condition, if you ask people, would you share this online if you were to see it? Just like, how like interesting is this to you to share to people with other people. Then you see like people barely distinguish between what's true and false. In fact, the people who are deciding what to share more false headlines than are believed
Oh,
by the
wow.
people who are rating the accuracy, which implies that they're sharing things that they would be able to identify as being false if they thought about it. And so we do these experiments where we just simply remind people about accuracy, ask them a question about it, or like we'd have ad experiments on Twitter, field experiments. They're all just like simple reminders about accuracy. It's not telling them what to believe or giving them any information. It's just a reminder to think about accuracy, and that decreases the amount of false things that people share online because now they're thinking about, oh, is it true?
Right,
And not
right.
like, is it important? How does it make me look? Will it get likes? All that kind of stuff. Is it true? And so that's just like a simple example of how thinking a little bit more like differently about how you're engaging can have an influence.
So asking yourself, is it true before you forward something on?
Yeah, simple. Is this true? It sounds like it's like, and I get paid for this. It's like, well, such a simple recommendation, but it's something that people don't think about. And
Yeah.
it's not like, and part of the reason why is like, if you think about how social media works, it's not like you get rewarded for sharing things that are true.
No,
Uh, so
no.
it's not something that automatically is something that people are going to think about. And so you need reminders. You need to make sure that people are on top of it.
Right. So you're in you're in education. You teach this class at Cornell.
Hmm.
Um, is there any, and you do a lot of research, and you're obviously the spokesperson kind of on this, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, all right.
Is there anything happening behind the scenes that we don't know about that is educating our younger generation? All generations, doesn't even matter, but I'm just saying younger because they're in school and we can control that. But to allow people, give them the tools to identify or have a protocol or think about social media in a different way before we just all, we've got millions of people sharing things that are untrue because they're just click of the wrist and that's it.
Oh God, no, obviously not. I mean, you would be in a very different world if we had something like
Oh,
that.
I
That
was
would
so
be awesome.
hopeful. I was so hopeful with you. Now you're going to say,
No,
yes,
no,
we're
no,
doing a
no.
study and we're implementing in schools. We've got a new class that's going to be rolled out. No, not happening.
No, I mean, yes, no. And I would love that. I mean, part of that is because, I mean, so in schools that you see a lot of focus on critical thinking, which is
Hmm.
a part of this conversation. Um, but there's no class on this. This is not taught like math. We should be
Yeah.
teaching critical thinking like we teach math. It's put what educators will say is that it's something that's in all these different classes, and it's like, oh, we make sure that in
Yeah.
history we're talking about critical thinking. But it's just I think we really need to, especially as applied to modern problems like social media, people need to be taught these things. Now there are places that do it. In Finland, they have actual classes in high
Okay.
school where kids in like I think maybe they start even before high school are learn how to like navigate the internet environment, and they are
Amazing.
and they're way more resistant to these sorts of problems. I'm like, even though I'm an educator, I work at a university. My research isn't in education. Like I don't have
Right.
any.
Yeah. I understand that. I'm just
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
putting it out
I
there.
know what you mean, but my influence, it doesn't go.
I feel
Anyways.
like you're connected to the right people though.
Maybe I should. I obviously not. I need, but it's very hard to get change in education. I
Yeah.
mean, and it depends on the country. And the United States is very difficult in particular. So I don't. I mean, I that you're right that I should, if I really cared, and I do. I really do care.
That's
What I should
next.
be doing, but I
That's
don't. I
next.
don't know what to do. So I'm lazy about that.
Okay, the class that you teach, I just want to know a little bit more about the class that you teach and how the students respond to that.
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, there's a huge interest in stupidity, and I mean, like I said before, like that's a lot of time that's about explaining other people's stupidity, and that I've been sort of doing that. But all the things that I've said are true of everybody. Like we're all lazy sometimes. We
Hmm.
all default to our intuitions when we should stop and think. Sometimes we make mistakes. I've shared things that were inaccurate on social media before. I think we kind of all have, unless you don't use social media, which good for you. And so in the class, what happens is I really try to change the way that people are thinking about their own thinking. It's many ways it's kind of a metacognition class. I'm not sure if you've come across this term,
So
but
change the way people are thinking about their own thinking.
exactly. It's like
Mm,
it's really about self-reflection. You have to, because the difficulty is it's easy to just say, oh, we need to stop and reflect.
yeah,
But I mean, obviously you can't do that about everything. Like
yeah,
it would be insane to just be really think, and then you'd be overthinking things and you would make mistakes. The question is, you have to be more reflective about the way that you're engaging in the world and the way that you're thinking about things. You're like, you have some sort of belief that you think is important, and then you have to make sure that, like, wait, is this something that I believe because I sort of want to believe it, or because there are good reasons for that? And we have to, like, there are times where we have to kind of stop and reflect. Now, you don't do that for every single thing that you believe, but there are times where you have to stop and think about things. And so that's kind of what the course is about. It's about just taking a more reflective stance on the world, and understanding the nature of the problem more. Because there's this great quote from George Miller, who's a psychologist, and he was the head of the American Psychological Association in 1969, and he wrote an essay about giving psychology away. And basically, his underlying argument is that if you think about the biggest problems that we face as a species, they're all problems that we've made for ourselves, like, climate change, all these things. These are, like, based on our own decisions. And then, like, if you want to fix those problems, you have to understand the underlying issue, which is our own minds, our own, how we make these choices. And so I'm just like, part of the class is like, what are the things that what kind of mistakes that we make? And then how to make things better? And mostly the simplest recommendation from that is to be more reflective and be more thoughtful about how we're engaging in the world.
And how did the students respond to that?
I mean, they nod when I'm talking. I don't know. Few of them are sleeping.
They're just BSing you with that nod.
Yeah. Sometimes they look up from their laptops. No, I get good feedback from the class, and I mean, whatever. It's hard to know. I need to run an actual experiment to know if it has an impact on what how people are actually approaching their thinking. And I've only taught it for 2 semesters, but it changed the way that I thought. Like, basically, I'm just saying, it's kind of like I entered into the research world, and this is what I learned, and I try to live my life by those same things. And I'm just like, now try to do that also. You know what I mean? It's very much of me search. I'm just like, be more like me,
Yeah.
But I do make sure a big part of that is you have to question yourself, but you have to question others too when you're doing that. That's this part and parcel.
So you focused a bit on social media. Actually, you go back to that quite a bit about checking yourself. Is it true? For thinking before you forward something. But are there other areas that we can take a look at that also are impacted by BS?
I mean, engaging with the news media. I mean, one of the biggest problems in, like, contemporary U.S. politics, you might say, is the kind of, like, folding of opinion into news. I mean, and one, like, there's a longstanding opinion of mine is, like, we do not have 24 hours of news to report. And so what you end up with on a 24-hour news station is, maybe an hour of real news and then 23 hours of prognostication. And people have a hard time distinguishing between what is news and what is opinion. And for all the reasons that I've already described.
Yeah.
And so it's a big problem, because it really shifts the way that people are engaging politically. It shifts the things that they believe about politics. It increases polarization. And so, like, part of what that means to be a more reflective person is, like, it's not just like, oh, okay, so you always watch the news and you're trying to, like, parse it. Some of it is like, sometimes I need to disengage from the stuff that isn't actually news. And it's because it's not of any function. It's just turning politics into entertainment, and we really need to avoid that sort of thing.
And again, you're saying to be aware of that, to think about it, to be thoughtful about it, to take the time to actually think and ask yourself questions and be reflective about what it is that you're engaging in.
Yeah. And what happens is that people are it's a reflexive take on the news, where you're like, so you say, I'll give an explicit example. You watch a debate, and you can come to your own opinions about the debate. What actually happens is you watch the debate and you see what the prognosticators say about who won and who lost.
Yeah.
And that's what forms the opinion. And so you're replacing your own thinking about what the candidates say with somebody else's thinking, or, it could be AI or whatever. So, like, that's, instead of having to do the work and to understand and to think about what you believe from your own perspective, you take somebody else's because it's easier.
Yeah, but just to throw back to you, intuition, it seems as though it's not uncommon to watch a debate, let's say, and have an intuition about it and say, oh, I loved so-and-so. Maybe they looked good that day. Maybe they didn't say ums and ahs. And you just intuitively said, oh, yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, that's a great point. Important to know that whatever your feelings were after the debate may not be also accurate or good. You have to think about that too. Right. Or, like, and that's another version of, like, making sure that the things that are driving what your actual takes are things that are reasonable.
Right.
But it's not easy. I mean, it's not. There's no simple answers for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
There's only small improvements.
Yeah. Gordon, anything I didn't ask you that you want to talk about? I know you do a lot of research, a lot of different things. If we're focused on one and you feel like we just need to give people a little piece of something else, please.
So one other thing that's worth talking about is overconfidence. It relates to what I've been kind of talking about, but because it's almost the kind of other side of this, where what happens is some people have heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Although if you look up the Dunning-Kruger effect online, what Google will show you is actually not the correct Dunning-Kruger effect, but the actual Dunning-Kruger effect is those who are the most incompetent are the least able to recognize their incompetence. The same kind of skills, especially if they're cognitive skills that are used to like do a task well, or to like, do like if it's a math test or something, are used to assess how good you are at this thing. And so there's like a double curse of kind of ignorance, basically, where the more ignorant you are, the worse you're going to be at making choices because you don't know what you're doing. But also, you're not going to be
Wow.
aware that you don't know or how much you don't know. And so
Wow.
and that's the thing that kind of stops people from recognizing that they need to learn more, or to like ask questions and so on. There's overconfidence, and it really relates to things like people who are overconfident are more likely to believe conspiracies. And I think the most extreme example of that is, so in this one study, what we did is we asked people, whether they believed a set of conspiracies. In this case, we kind of forced them to decide, is it more likely to be true or false? Okay. And then we asked them, estimate the percent of people that you think agree with you. Okay. And one like idea would be that like, well, people who believe conspiracies kind of enjoy like being on the fringe and being disagreeable and all that kind of stuff. And they would like therefore have some understanding that if only 10% of people believe this conspiracy, then like most people, they think that 10% of people agree with them. In reality, what we found is that, say a conspiracy that only like 9% of people believe. When we asked them, how many people do you think agree with you? They said 61% of people agree with them. And that one was about the Sandy Hook false flag conspiracy, which is a crazy conspiracy.
Wow.
So they think they're in the majority, and that's particularly true of overconfident people. So they're so overconfident that like not only are they kind of miscalibrated from reality in terms of what their beliefs are, but they don't even know that like they're totally on the fringe. And so this is the kind of like important kind of like barrier of overconfidence in terms of the kind of how people are thinking.
Wow. So can those people be swayed in any way if they have a belief in something? Are they part of the 25% that you were talking about earlier? Or are they always the 75%? They are not going to change their mind.
Well, they tend to be harder to sway, but they're not impossible.
Okay.
Because if you give them the right information, I mean, another way to think about this is that most of the time, people don't walk down the rabbit hole. They fall down it. Like they don't know what at the end of it is. They don't know that they think the earth is going to be flat once they watch all these YouTube videos. They kind of incrementally end up believing that the earth is flat after they've seen a bunch of different things that kind of support that argument. And so to get them back out, it's not different cognitively. Like the underlying processes are the same to walk them back, but you just need at least as much stuff to walk back up the ladder to get out of the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And what people want is like in 5 minutes to be like, oh, you're wrong. And people are like, how come that didn't work? But you need, if you spend 20 hours watching these videos, you need 20 hours of good stuff to unwind the damage, right? So even if you're overconfident, people's minds can be changed. But the problem is that if you're overconfident, you're not going to put the work in yourself. You need help. You need someone to come in and kind of be like, listen, this is where you're making mistakes. And there has to be something that breaks through that barrier of overconfidence.
But you're saying that overconfidence more often than not is aligned with stupidity.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing that causes it. Yeah. And stupidity is errors. Overconfidence is perhaps the most important kind of underlying cause. It's this thing that stops us from stopping and reflecting. It's the thing that makes us think that we know more than we do. And that's the biggest problem.
Wow. What's next for you? What's the research that's happening? What's the next class?
So we're doing more studies on how to evaluate the extent to which people update their beliefs according to evidence by using these large language models,
how
these AI
often they
conversations.
update their beliefs.
Yeah, how much can we get it so that people will actually take a more reasonable stance if we provide good arguments, essentially.
Okay.
And we've done stuff in like political domains, and as an example of a sort of study that we've just very recently run that people are finding surprising is we have the sort of experiment I talked about before, where people are talking about a conspiracy with this AI, and the AI is giving them all these facts and evidence, and they change their mind about it.
Hmm.
And one experiment what we did is we told people the AI, and this is for all partisans, and this is in the States, the AI was trained on Democratic sources. And then we told that to
Oh,
Republicans, or we told Republicans it's trained on, or Democrat sources, that's what I just said, or we told Democrats it's trained on Republican sources, or we said it was, or vice versa. If they're
yeah.
Democrat, we said it's trained on Democrat sources, or it was neutral. And what you'd expect is that the effect would be weaker, right? If people think that the bot is trained on these other sources,
Right.
then they're not going to believe it.
Yeah.
Of course, the bot is the same in all the conditions. The only thing that differs is like what they believe about the bot.
Wow.
It has no effect at all.
Wait a minute. Really?
I know. It has no, if you tell people, and the reason why that works is because the bot provides such a strong argument that even if you come into the conversation thinking, I'm not going to believe this, like this is like a Democrat bot, like it's going to say something stupid, but then it says a really good argument, people are like, oh, okay. So we've really overweighted the influence of like these political motivations in belief updating, and like, so a lot of the work what we're working on now is just like really kind of testing the limits of how far you can go with good arguments. And I think we're getting surprising results.
So this sounds so much more hopeful than I expected.
Isn't it? I know, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm an optimist or something. I'm not sure, but that's what the results are. I mean, it could have gone differently, but
Right.
that's what we
Right.
found.
I mean, there is, if you have a good argument and you can present facts, you can change someone's mind.
Yeah, and the reason why it's kind of counterintuitive is that the source really matters if it's ambiguous. If you don't know what to do with the information, knowing it comes from a trusted source is like really important. But if it's like a really solid argument or it's really strong evidence, it could come from somebody that you think
Oh,
is kind of crazy. But then what you'd probably do is like you'd think, well, maybe the person is not as crazy as I thought.
uh-huh.
And like there was a prominent example of this. Marjorie Taylor Greene
Yeah.
is a U.S. representative,
Yeah.
and she had like talked about conspiracy theories and all these different things, and then more recently was like saying things that were reasonable, and people weren't like, oh, I don't believe the reasonable things because it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. They said maybe she's more reasonable than I thought she was,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's just that people are I think more reasonable than we give them credit for, and I think
Wow.
one way to think about that is we all think that individually we are reasonable, and then we think other people aren't. If we just kind of bridge that gap, we probably are more unreasonable than we think we are, and other people are less unreasonable than we think they are. So that's the gap that needs to be bridged.
And first steps to bridge that gap.
Well, first step is start questioning your own views. That helps you realize that your stances maybe aren't as ironclad as you thought they were, and it undermines overconfidence. And the second thing is to understand that other people, it's not that they don't care about the truth, but they live in different information environments often, especially in the United States. And the things that they believe are based on their own experiences. And we should maybe give them some credit and some slack for that.
Okay. And in order to do that, let's leave people with one or two things that they can start working on today if they want to recheck themselves, if they want to make sure they're not bullshitting or believing bullshit. What can they do today?
So one thing is think about the convenient truths, the things that you are really beneficial to you and that we really want to be true. Those are the cases where you have the biggest blind spot, and so we have to kind of double check those in particular. And the second thing is maybe even more important is we need to reevaluate how we're engaging, particularly online, because you have to understand that these systems that are in place in like the context of the social media kind of like automatic attention economy. It puts us into the mode of being more kind of intuitive and not stopping and reflecting. And so we need to kind of like either disengage or change the way that we engage with these mediums. And so that's the second thing.
When you say change the way we engage, what go deeper?
Before you share something, stop and think, is this accurate? Change if there's a bunch of stuff that you're following that is like outrage, farming, don't follow it anymore. Change the nature of your feed so it's got more
Right.
positive stuff. Or like make sure that if somebody is giving information that's inaccurate, you gotta cut that out, because even if you think that you can be able to sift through it, it will have an impact on you. So we have to be more mindful of how we're curating our kind of information environments.
Yeah. Professor Pennycook, thank you so much. I know you have to get to class, so appreciate you fitting me in just before class right now.
Oh, my pleasure.
What's on the agenda today for class?
Well, that's the final class, so I'm doing a wrap up. I'm hopefully leaving with a positive message of you can do this. Let's be better in the world.
Hopeful. If there's anything
Hopeful
I've
message.
taken from this conversation, is it's hopeful.
I think so. That's the message for the class.
Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.